The words hit me like a slap. I stood in his corner office, watching my boss lean back in his leather chair with that smug smile I'd grown to hate. "You're replaceable," he said, loud enough for everyone in the open office to hear. "Don't bother coming back tomorrow." I felt my face burn as 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed. Others seemed relieved it wasn't them standing there. "After 3 years?" I managed. He shrugged like I was nothing. Like the late nights fixing his mistakes meant nothing. Like the clients I'd saved were just lucky breaks. "Business is business. Clear out your desk." I walked out with my head up, but inside I was dying. 3 years of my life, gone in 30 seconds. The worst part wasn't losing the job. It was how he'd done it, making sure everyone knew I was disposable. The elevator ride down felt like falling into a black hole. 24 floors of dropping while my mind raced. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Car payment next Friday. Maybe $800 in savings. That night, I sat staring at my laptop, too overwhelmed to start job hunting. The word replaceable echoed in my head like a broken record. I packed my things slowly, trying not to cry in front of my former coworkers. Pictures, my coffee mug, the plant I'd kept alive for 2 years. Everything fit into one sad cardboard box. A few coworkers mumbled sorry as I left, but nobody offered to help or even asked if I was okay. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. How long could I survive without income? What jobs were available? Would anyone hire someone who'd just been fired for being replaceable? My apartment looked different when I got home. Smaller somehow. The rent notice on my counter seemed to glow with threat. $900 due in 12 days. I opened my laptop and stared at job search websites until my eyes burned. Every posting seemed to require experience I didn't have or skills I couldn't prove. The application process felt hopeless before I even started. Outside my window, the city buzzed with people who had jobs, had security, had futures that weren't crumbling. I felt completely alone, cut off from the working world by one man's cruel decision. The word, replaceable, followed me to sleep, whispering that maybe he was right. Maybe I really was nothing special. The rejection emails came fast and brutal. "We've decided to move forward with other candidates. Position has been filled." Each one felt like another confirmation that I was indeed replaceable. I applied to 50 jobs the first week. Got 3 responses, all rejections. The second week, I lowered my standards, applying for positions below my experience level. Still nothing. Sleep became impossible. I'd lie awake at 3 a.m., my mind racing through everything I'd done wrong. Maybe my boss had seen something I couldn't see about myself. I started avoiding friends' calls because I was embarrassed. When they texted asking about work, I made excuses about being busy. I couldn't admit I was failing at the basic adult task of keeping a job. By week 3, I was checking email every 5 minutes, desperate for any response that wasn't a rejection. My savings dwindled as bills kept coming. Coffee became a luxury I couldn't afford. The worst part was running into people I knew. My neighbor asked about work while we got mail. I mumbled something about between opportunities and hurried back inside. The phrase replaceable had burned itself into my brain, playing on repeat during every sleepless night. Maybe he was right. Maybe I really wasn't worth keeping around. The knock came at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. My landlord stood there holding an official paper. She wasn't smiling. "Rent was due 5 days ago," she said, all business. My stomach dropped. I'd been hoping to find a job before she noticed. "I can get it to you by Friday. I'm waiting on interview responses." She shook her head. "Second time in 6 months. I run a business, not a charity." She handed me the paper, a formal warning. End of the month, or I start eviction proceedings. After she left, I slumped against my door and finally let myself cry. Real, ugly tears that had been building for weeks. 26 years old and about to be homeless. I called my bank about payment extensions on my car loan. The representative was polite but firm. No exceptions without proof of hardship, and even then, it just delayed the inevitable. That evening, I sat surrounded by bills I couldn't pay, staring at my nearly empty refrigerator. Replaceable wasn't just what my boss thought of me. It was what I was becoming to everyone. The walls of my apartment seemed to close in. Soon I might not even have this small space to call home. My phone buzzed while I was eating ramen for the third day straight. A text from Edward, my old coworker from marketing. "Hey, heard what happened. That's messed up. Wanna grab coffee?" I almost said no. Couldn't afford coffee shop prices anymore. But something in his message made me agree. We met downtown where I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu. "He's always been a jerk," Edward said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "But firing you like that? In front of everyone? That was cruel even for him." It felt good to have someone acknowledge how humiliating it had been. "You know what, though?" Edward leaned forward. "You were always the smartest person in that office. Remember the Jackson account? You saved that deal when his strategy was failing." I'd forgotten about that. My boss had taken all the credit, of course. "Ever thought about starting something yourself?" Edward asked. "Freelance consulting? You've got skills he could never replace." The word replace stung, but something else stirred in my chest. A tiny spark I hadn't felt in weeks. I wouldn't know where to start. "Start small," Edward said. "Build from there. You've got nothing to lose now, right?" Walking home, his words kept replaying. Maybe being replaceable wasn't the end of my story. I spent that weekend building a basic freelance website. Nothing fancy, free template, simple copy. But seeing my name and skills laid out professionally gave me confidence I desperately needed. My first client came from Craigslist. A local bakery needed social media help. They could only pay $200, but it was something. I threw myself into that project like my life depended on it. Because it did. I researched their competitors, analyzed their target market, created a month's worth of content. The owner, Maya, was thrilled. Her followers doubled in the first week. "Can you do our website too?" she asked. Soon I had 3 small clients. A bakery, a gym, and a pet grooming service. None paid much, but together they covered basic expenses. I worked from my couch, laptop balanced on a pillow. The work was harder than my old job. I handled everything myself. But nobody could fire me for being replaceable. I was building something that belonged to me. Late nights didn't feel punishing anymore. They felt productive. Every client success was mine to claim. I started thinking about my old boss less and less. I was too busy proving him wrong. Sleep became optional. I'd work until 2 a.m. finishing projects, wake up at 6 a.m. to start again. Coffee shops became my office since my apartment felt too cramped for the amount of work I was doing. I knew every 24-hour cafe in the city. The one with broken AC but strong Wi-Fi. The diner where Elena, the waitress, brought free refills without being asked. The fast food place where I could nurse one coffee for hours. My laptop battery died one night at the diner. I finished a client presentation by hand, writing marketing strategies on napkins. Elena saw me struggling and let me plug in behind the counter. "Working late again?" she asked, setting down coffee I hadn't ordered. "Building something?" I said, too tired to explain. She nodded like she understood. First year nearly killed my cousin when he started his restaurant. Now he owns 3. Some nights I cried from exhaustion. My back ached from hunching over tiny tables. But my client list was growing. Word of mouth was powerful in small business circles. The money wasn't great yet, but it was mine. Nobody could take it away by calling me replaceable. My old boss felt like a distant memory, a bad dream I was finally waking up from. Everything changed when Rodriguez Industries called. They needed a complete marketing overhaul, website redesign, social media strategy, product launch campaign. The kind of project my old company would have charged $50,000 for. "We found your work through Maya's bakery," the owner explained. "She said you transformed their business. Can you handle something bigger?" My heart pounded as I quoted $3,000 for 6 weeks of work. I held my breath, waiting for them to laugh. "When can you start?" I threw myself into that project completely. Research, strategy sessions, late-night brainstorming. I created presentations that would have made my old boss jealous. The website was sleek and professional, the campaign creative but strategic. When Rodriguez launched their new product line, sales exceeded projections by 40%. They paid on time and immediately hired me for another project. For the first time in months, I could pay all my bills without panic. I even bought real groceries, actual food instead of ramen and peanut butter. That night, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was succeeding. The validation felt incredible. I wasn't replaceable after all. I was irreplaceable. Edward texted 3 months later with news that made my entire day. Thompson's been losing clients left and right. Word's getting around about how he treats people. I should have felt bad for my former coworkers, but honestly, I felt pure satisfaction. Johnson Thompson was my old boss's full name, the man who'd humiliated me. Really? I texted back. Wilson account dropped them last week. Said Thompson was arrogant and unprofessional. Kelly from accounting quit yesterday. No notice. Just left her keys on his desk. I smiled for the first time in months when thinking about my old workplace. The man who'd called me replaceable was discovering that clients and employees could replace him just as easily. Over the next weeks, Edward kept me updated. Thompson's company was hemorrhaging talent. Their biggest client was asking questions about project delays. The office atmosphere was toxic. He's working late every night, Edward told me over coffee. Looks stressed. His hair's actually thinning. I picture Thompson in his corner office, wondering where everything went wrong. The man who'd treated people like disposable objects was learning what disposable felt like. Karma was finally catching up. The sweet irony wasn't lost on me. He was becoming as replaceable as he'd made me feel. The email that changed everything came on a Wednesday. Rodriguez Industries wanted to expand their marketing budget and needed a long-term consultant. But they weren't the only ones interested. We've been talking to other business owners, Mr. Rodriguez explained during our video call. Your reputation is spreading. We'd like to offer you an exclusive contract. The number he quoted made me dizzy. More money than I'd made in my entire last year at Thompson's company. Steady income, creative control, respect for my ideas. But the best part came at the end. By the way, we used to work with Thompson Marketing Solutions. Glad we made the switch. I nearly choked. Thompson Marketing? Terrible experience. The owner was condescending and his strategies were outdated. We heard you used to work there before starting your own thing. Smart move getting out when you did. After hanging up, I sat laughing until tears ran down my face. The company Thompson had bragged about landing had fired him because of his arrogance. Now they were paying me, the replaceable employee, to do better work. I thought about calling Edward to share the news, but decided to keep this victory private for now. Some secrets were too delicious to share immediately. My cramped apartment felt smaller as my business grew. I'd outgrown the couch office setup, but couldn't afford anything bigger yet. My dining table was covered with client files. My bedroom floor had boxes of materials. Every morning I'd wake up surrounded by evidence of my success, but still stuck in the same tiny space where I'd cried after getting fired. The contrast was getting harder to ignore. One evening, while working on a presentation, I researched rental prices in better neighborhoods. The numbers were depressing. Even with my new income, decent apartments were still out of reach. That's when I started dreaming bigger. Not just a nicer apartment, but actual ownership. I was tired of begging landlords for repairs, tired of living under someone else's rules. I researched real estate investment, reading about house hacking and property management. Most seemed impossible. Down payments were more than I'd made in years. But one strategy caught my attention: real estate investment groups that pooled money from multiple investors. It was crazy. I was barely 6 months into freelancing, still building my emergency fund. But the dream of owning property, of collecting rent instead of paying it, was intoxicating. Maybe it was time to take a bigger risk. Maybe it was time to stop playing it safe. The news came through Edward on a Friday afternoon while I was reviewing contracts. Big news, Thompson's company is downsizing. Lost 3 more clients this month. They're selling the office building. I stopped reading mid-sentence. Wait, they own the building? Thompson bought it 5 years ago, when business was good. Now he's desperate to sell, asking way below market value, just to get out fast. I stared out my window, mind racing. Thompson's building was a nice mid-size office space downtown. The kind of property that could be valuable if managed correctly. A crazy idea started forming. Impossible, but crazy enough to work. I spent the weekend researching that building. Property records, recent sales, rental rates for similar spaces. The numbers were very interesting. By Sunday, I'd contacted 3 real estate investment groups. Most seemed skeptical, a freelancer with limited capital wanting commercial property. But Pacific Property Investors seemed intrigued. We specialize in helping new investors get started, their representative said. Let's meet. I hung up feeling like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to either jump or fall. The timing felt like destiny. Thompson's desperation could become my opportunity. The meeting with Pacific Property Investors was in a sleek downtown office that intimidated me. 5 people sat around a glass table, all looking more successful than I felt. Tell us about your finances, the lead investor, Ms. Cooper, said after introductions. I laid out my numbers honestly. 6 months of freelance income, growing client base, decent credit but limited savings. They listened without judgment. The building you're interested in is unusual, Ms. Cooper said carefully. Owner seems motivated to sell quickly. That creates opportunity, but also risk. They explained the process. I'd contribute $15,000, nearly everything I had plus a small loan, for 10% of the property. The group would handle management and tenants. I'd get monthly checks based on rental income. It's a big risk for someone starting out, another investor warned. Real estate isn't guaranteed money. I thought about Thompson sitting in that building, panicking about his failing business. The man who'd called me replaceable was about to lose everything. I want to do it, I said. 2 weeks later, I signed papers committing nearly every dollar I had. My hands shook writing the check, but my voice was steady. I was betting everything on this one shot at revenge. The day we closed on Thompson's building, I stood across the street watching. It looked smaller from outside, but it was mine now. Well, 10% mine, but more ownership than I'd ever had. Pacific Property Investors moved fast. Within a week, they'd found 3 companies interested in renting space. A design firm, an accounting practice, and a tech startup needing cheap office space. My first rental check was $200, 10% of that month's profit. But holding it felt better than any paycheck I'd received from Thompson. How does it feel? Ms. Cooper asked during our monthly meeting. Like the beginning of something bigger. She smiled. Good. We've got another opportunity next month. Small apartment complex in University District. Higher investment, better returns. I was already saving every penny, planning for the next investment. My cramped apartment didn't bother me as much now. It was temporary. A stepping stone. That night, I drove past Thompson's old building. Lights were on in several offices, new businesses already making better use of the space than his company ever had. I wondered if he knew who owned it now. The thought made me smile. Karma was working in mysterious ways. The text from Ms. Cooper came while I was having lunch with a client. Call me when you're free. Interesting development with the downtown property. I excused myself immediately. One of our potential tenants for the 3rd floor is Thompson Marketing Solutions, she said. They're looking to downsize. Should I tell them it's unavailable? My heart raced. Thompson, my old boss who'd fired me, was trying to rent space in a building I now partly owned. No, I said slowly. Don't tell them that. What did they say exactly? The owner called personally. Seemed desperate. Said they needed to move fast due to financial pressures. Willing to pay 6 months up front. I closed my eyes, letting the irony wash over me. Thompson's company was struggling so badly he was willing to rent instead of own. And by pure chance, he was trying to rent from the employee he'd thrown away. I'd like to be involved in tenant screening, I said carefully. Of course. That's your right as an investor. After hanging up, I sat laughing until tears ran down my face. The universe was giving me an opportunity one never could have planned. Thompson didn't know yet, but his former replaceable employee was about to become his landlord. Ms. Cooper called the night before Thompson's building tour. You'll meet one of the potential tenants tomorrow. A Mr. Johnson who runs some marketing company that's downsizing.
Wait.
I thought his name was Thompson. The application says Johnson Thompson. Apparently, he goes by his middle name professionally. My mind raced. Johnson Thompson. All these years, I'd only known him as Thompson, never realizing it was his last name. Is everything okay? Ms. Cooper asked. You went quiet. Everything's fine. What time is the meeting? 2 p.m. I'll introduce you as one of our key investors involved in tenant relations. After hanging up, I couldn't stop smiling. Tomorrow, Johnson Thompson would discover that his former employee, the one he'd called replaceable, was now in a position of power over him. I spent extra time getting ready, choosing my best professional outfit. Not to impress him, but to show how far I'd come. I wanted. Johnson Thompson stepped out, looking older and stressed. When he saw me, his face went completely white. The silence stretched forever. Johnson stood frozen by the elevator, mouth slightly open, staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. What are you doing here? He finally managed, his voice cracking. Ms. Cooper looked between us, confused. Do you two know each other? We used to work together, I said calmly, enjoying his obvious panic. At Thompson Marketing Solutions. Actually, Mr. Johnson here was my former boss. The one who fired me for being replaceable. Johnson's face went from white to red. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Ms. Cooper's eyebrows rose as she understood the situation. Well, this is unexpected, she said diplomatically. Should we proceed with the tour or reschedule? Johnson, he corrected automatically, then seemed to realize how stupid that sounded. I stepped forward slightly. Actually, Ms. Cooper, I think we should proceed. After all, business is business, isn't it, Johnson? Using his own words against him felt sweeter than honey. He flinched like I'd slapped him. Perhaps we could discuss this privately, he said, looking around nervously. There's nothing to discuss privately. You're here as a potential tenant. I'm here as an investor. Shall we see the space? Johnson followed us to the elevator, like a man walking to his execution. The tour was beautifully awkward. Johnson kept glancing at me nervously while Ms. Cooper showed the office space, the same type where he'd once humiliated me. Rental rate is $3,000 per month, Ms. Cooper explained, plus utilities and maintenance fees. Johnson nodded, trying to appear professional despite his obvious discomfort. And lease terms? Standard is 3 years, though we might consider shorter terms for the right tenant. I stepped forward smoothly. Actually, given recent concerns about business stability in the marketing sector, I think we'd prefer a shorter lease with higher security deposit. Ms. Cooper looked at me curiously but nodded. Protecting our investment is crucial. Johnson's jaw tightened. What kind of security deposit? For a potentially unstable business? I pretended to consider. 6 months upfront plus deposit equal to 3 months' rent. Standard for high-risk tenants. High risk. Johnson's voice rose. My company's been operating successfully for 8 years. Has it though? I asked innocently. From what I hear, you've been losing clients recently. Business isn't what it used to be. The look on his face was priceless. The man who'd once held all power over my livelihood was now begging me for space. So, I said calmly, let's talk about your application. Application. Johnson sputtered. I smiled. All potential tenants need screening. Credit checks, financial statements, references. Standard procedure. His face cycled through emotions, anger, embarrassment, desperation. The same emotions I'd felt when he fired me. Look, he said, his voice taking on a pleading tone I'd never heard. The market's been rough. Everyone's struggling. It's not personal. It's just economic reality. I almost laughed. Economic reality? That's interesting. I remember you telling me business was business when you fired me. No consideration for my personal situation then. That was different. You were just one employee. I have 12 people depending on me now. So you had no problem making one person struggle, but now that you're struggling, it's everyone else's fault. Ms. Cooper cleared her throat. Perhaps we should focus on the application. Mr. Thompson, can you meet our security requirements? Johnson looked cornered. 6 months up front would be difficult right now. Could we negotiate? I exchanged a look with Miss Cooper. I held all the cards now. The man who'd made me beg for basic respect was begging me for favorable lease terms. We'll consider your application, I said coolly. You'll hear back within 48 hours. The power felt intoxicating. Here's what I'm willing to do, I said the next day, adopting the same business tone Johnson had used when firing me. Month-to-month lease only. No long-term commitment until your company proves financial stability. Johnson's eyes widened. Month-to-month? That's not standard for commercial properties. Neither is renting to companies with payment issues, I replied smoothly. Take it or leave it. Ms. Cooper watched our exchange with fascination. This was probably the most dramatic tenant screening she'd witnessed. Rent would be $3,500 monthly on short-term lease, I continued, plus security deposit equal to 2 months' rent. All utilities separate. No modifications without written approval. That's almost double what we're paying now, Johnson protested. Then maybe you should have treated your employees better when business was good. Maybe you'd still have them helping you succeed instead of watching you fail. The silence was deafening. Johnson looked like he wanted to argue, but he was desperate. His current landlord was evicting him, and finding commercial space quickly was nearly impossible. I'll need to think about it, he said finally. You have until tomorrow at noon, I said. After that, we'll offer the space to other applicants. Riding the elevator down, I felt more powerful than ever. The man who'd made me feel worthless was now subject to my decisions. Edward called that evening, practically vibrating with excitement. Dude, the office is going crazy. Johnson just told everyone you're potentially his new landlord. People are losing their minds. I settled on my couch, phone pressed to my ear. What kind of reactions? Half the office is laughing. The other half can't believe it. Kelly heard from her friend who still works there and called just to say, justice is real. My heart swelled. Kelly had been one of the few genuinely nice people there. Johnson's been pacing all day, Edward continued, muttering about impossible situations and disrespectful former employees. He actually asked if I had your number. What did you tell him? That you're probably too busy running your successful business to chat with former bosses who called you replaceable. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. The idea of Johnson wanting to reach out, probably to beg for better lease terms, was perfect. Oh, and the best part? He's telling everyone it's all a misunderstanding, that he always respected your work. Apparently you were one of his most valued employees who left to pursue entrepreneurial opportunities. The revisionist history was pathetic but predictable. Johnson was rewriting the narrative to save face, but everyone remembered what really happened. His reputation was crumbling one conversation at a time. Johnson signed the lease the next morning. Ms. Cooper handled paperwork while I watched from across the conference room, trying not to smile too obviously. Everything appears in order, she said, sliding signed documents into a folder. First month's rent and security deposit due upon signing. Johnson's hand trembled as he wrote the check. $7,500 to move into a building that used to be his. One more thing, I said as he prepared to leave. Rental payments must be made by the 1st of each month. Late fees are $50 per day after day 3. No exceptions. He looked up sharply. That seems strict. Just good business practice, I replied, using his old phrase. I'm sure someone with your experience understands consistent cash flow importance. 2 months in, Johnson's company missed their first payment. Ms. Cooper called on the 4th. Thompson Marketing is 3 days late. Should I start late fees? Absolutely. Rules are rules. By day 7, they owed an extra $350 in fees. Johnson called me directly. This is getting out of hand, he said. We're having temporary cash flow issues. Can we work something out? Sorry, I said sweetly. Business is business. Long silence. Then Johnson hung up without another word. The tables had completely turned. The final blow came just before Christmas. Johnson's company had struggled with payments for 3 months, always making excuses, always promising things would improve soon. Ms. Cooper presented the official notice. They're 2 months behind. We need to start eviction proceedings. I read the legal document, feeling satisfaction mixed with sadness. Not for Johnson, but for his employees who didn't deserve to suffer. What's the timeline? 30 days notice, then legal action if they don't pay or vacate. I thought about it overnight. Part of me wanted to drag this out, make Johnson suffer like he'd made me suffer. But I wasn't him. I didn't enjoy causing unnecessary pain. The next morning, I told Ms. Cooper to proceed with standard eviction. When Johnson received the notice, he called immediately. I let it go to voicemail, then listened with grim satisfaction. Please, his recorded voice sounded desperate. I know we've had differences, but this will destroy my business. I have employees, families depending on this company. Can we work something out? The same man who'd shown me no mercy was now begging for mercy. I deleted the message without calling back. A week later, Edward texted, Johnson's telling everyone the eviction is personal revenge. Says you're destroying his business out of spite. I wasn't destroying anything. His failures were doing that fine. Moving day arrived with gray December clouds and bitter wind. I didn't plan to be there, but curiosity won. I parked across the street and watched Johnson's company pack up their failure. 2 moving trucks sat outside my building. Johnson stood on the sidewalk directing workers, his expensive suit replaced by jeans and a wrinkled shirt. He looked older, beaten down by months of pressure. His employees carried boxes with resignation of people who knew they'd probably be job hunting soon. Some I recognized from my time there. Good people who deserved better leadership. Edward appeared beside my car, grinning. Couldn't stay away either? Wanted to see how it ended. We watched Johnson make multiple trips to his car, loading personal items from the office where he'd called me replaceable. Funniest part? Edward said. He's telling people this is temporary. Planning a comeback. As if summoned, Johnson looked across the street and spotted us. His face twisted with anger. He stormed over, not caring about traffic. Are you happy now? He shouted through my window. You've destroyed everything I built. I rolled down the window calmly. I didn't destroy anything, Johnson. You did that when you decided people were disposable. He stood shaking with rage while former employees watched. Replaceable, right? I added softly, then drove away. 6 months later, I unlocked the front door of my old workplace with my own key. The building was thriving, fully rented with successful businesses that paid on time and treated employees well. I'd expanded my investment portfolio to 2 more properties. My freelance business had grown into a small agency with 3 employees. People I treated with respect and paid fair wages. The corner office that used to be Johnson's was mine now. I'd moved my company into the space, turning the room where I'd been humiliated into my headquarters. Standing at the window where Johnson used to look down on the city, I thought about the journey. From that devastating day, when I was called replaceable, to owning the building where it happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Edward. Heard Johnson's working at a call center now. Karma's beautiful. I didn't feel triumphant anymore. Just satisfied. Justice had been served not through revenge, but through my own success. I walked to my desk, the same spot where my old cubicle used to be, and opened my laptop. 3 new client inquiries waited. Companies that wanted to hire me. Replaceable. I whispered to the empty office, then smiled and got back to work. Nobody could replace what I'd built. Nobody could take away what I'd earned. Some stories end with revenge. Mine ended with something better. Proof that being called replaceable was the best thing that ever happened to me. If this story inspired you to never give up on your dreams, smash that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your support means everything to creators like me who believe everyone has an irreplaceable story worth telling.